Hi, my name is Grant Mooney. I've been in the IT and cybersecurity industry for over 5 years at this point. Along my journey, I've earned two master's degrees and over 15 industry certifications. And a section of those industry certifications have been me passing over seven CompTIA exams on the first attempt. And I've developed this 6 step methodology that I want to pass along to you today, free, no strings attached, so that you can approach these. I have not done this in a vacuum. This is something that I've passed along in my work as a adjunct professor of applied computer science. I've been teaching these same steps to numerous students so that they too can take these CompTIA exams and pass them on the first attempt without wasting any time, without going any slower than you need to. So I'm going to run through these 6 and then I'll circle back and give you some more depth on them. The first step is review and assess your understanding of the material. Ideally, this looks like a mock assessment. Should be less than 1 day for this. Steps 2 and 3 are engage in deep structured learning. And for step 2 and simultaneously step 3 is performing repetition of new or unfamiliar concepts with discipline along your journey. These phases, this phase of steps 2 and 3, this could take anywhere from 1 month to 9 months, depending on where you're at in your background. And if it takes you longer than that, you're probably not studying effectively. And that's okay, but that's my recommendation. Okay, step 4, creating an itemized cheat sheet of all domain objectives. We'll unpack that more later. Step 5, scheduling the exam in advance to give yourself what I like to call a red line window for prep. And we'll talk more about what that means. And then finally, step 6, taking mock tests and reviewing concepts and answers that you don't know or get wrong. Think exhaustive mastery. Let's dive into a little bit more of what I mean by this process. So for step 1, what we're doing is reviewing and understanding our current place of where we are with our particular CompTIA exam. So one of the key places I always go to and really should be what I would consider like the Bible of the CompTIA exams is what's called the certification exam objectives. Right here, as you can see on my screen, I'm sharing the latest and greatest A+. So I go here and then this will split it up into domains. Domains 1 through 4, we see here operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. Now, what I want you to do is look at that percentage of the exam. And this is going to be unique to every single CompTIA certification. Some are going to have big differences in weighting of how many questions on the test are going to be for a particular topic, and others are going to be more split even. So for this one, we can see for this A+ that we're using as an example, 28% is on operating systems, 28% is on security, 23% is on software troubleshooting, and then 21% is on operational procedures. So something good to know. What I recommend is mock exams. If you look here, I'm sharing CISA Plus practice test. This was a big book. This is by Mike Chappell and David Seidel. Hopefully I'm saying his last name right. This is a fantastic resource. Has over 1,000 practice questions covering all the exam objectives. So some kind of resource. Now there's online quizzes and mock tests that are great resources. There's different tools out there that range in different prices. So maybe a book like that is something under $100. There's platforms like UCertify that are fantastic, but they can get kind of pricey if you're paying out of pocket. They're closer to $500 for a course. So that gets pretty expensive. I'd love to hear anybody watching this, if you're interested in more courses or actual entire all-in-one exams, content, stuff like that from me, what you think a fair price would be. I'd love to hear that in the comments if I were to launch a course. But those are the key things you want to look for. Review and assess your understanding of the material. Ideally, this is going to be less than 1 day. And here's a rough outline of timeline of what you should prep for. So you are simply going through this entire document with a quick glance to see, is most of these things new to you per domain? Are some of these familiar to you? Are you familiar with particular commands that you find or concepts? And give yourself a rough outline. If it's all new, that's okay. If 50% of it's covered, that means maybe you might be able to move a little faster. But it's good to get an idea of everything that's going to be covered on the exam. Okay, enough of that. Step 2, engaging in deep structured learning. Now, deep structured learning can be done different ways. I've got an example here pulled up of Mike Myers, a great titan in the space of teaching CompTIA exams. He has helped to publish what's called the All-in-One series, and you'll see these for most of the CompTIA exams. Now, I enjoy reading when it is particularly for understanding a complex topic. So if I am trying to really grasp a particular unique concept, or I'm really struggling to learn a certain thing, that's when I prefer to do some deep research. I go look it up online, read some articles, read some pages, watch some YouTube videos. And this is where a traditional textbook could come in handy. Now, the only challenge is this textbook here, and this is older, I'm just using this for reference to give you an understanding. This is 1,100 pages. So if you've never read a book beyond 200 pages, 300 pages, 400 pages, 1,100 pages is quite a challenge. And a lot of people, they get bored, they get sleepy, they just can't focus. And I totally understand that. So I think video content is really helpful for those kinds of people. If you are someone that can successfully learn through reading, then I think it's a great part of the overall strategy. So when we're talking about structured learning, what I am looking for and what I'm advising you is a detailed, organized plan that goes through everything in the objectives document. This document is 20 pages, and each word and concept on these pages is full of things to learn, understand, and apply. So you can't just read this 20-page document. You really have to research every concept in this 20-page document. So once you get to that place, a structured approach is helpful to make sure you don't have any gaps in your knowledge. Depending on where you come in with your knowledge and experience, these structured paths can be more or less helpful. But I encourage anyone that's going for an exam and they're trying to get that certification to go through at least one structured learning resource, ideally an online course, a textbook, something like that. And if there's multiple methods that they are aware of personally, as some self-awareness guiding, they can have multiple modes of learning. A little textbook here, a little YouTube here, a little structured course here. But I think the key here is structure. Someone has to have covered all of the concepts, or you're going to have gaps in your knowledge and understanding, and you're gonna miss things. Okay, third, repetition of new or unfamiliar concepts with discipline along the journey. Now, let's go through the timeline here. So we have reviewed and assessed, ideally it's taken about 1 day, where we are at. We're honest with ourselves of what this journey is going to look like. We have begun to engage in deep structured learning. Now, the challenge when we're undertaking this massive amount of information is that we have to learn new things and then ingrain the things that we are currently learning while we begin to move on to next topics and tasks. So practically, what I recommend in my 6-step process is that as you are going through the structured learning, you need to be taking a little bit of time out of each day or week to be setting aside time to perform repetition. What does this mean practically? That could be flashcards, that could be a tool on a mobile app that is just refreshing concepts, that could be quizzes that you're going through testing your knowledge. There's something essential about testing your knowledge and working through that. That's why step number 1 is literally take a test and sit down and do your best and get an accurate understanding of where you are. So one of the reasons behind that, there's this book I read. I've done a lot of research on learning theory. This is called Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning. Fantastic book about learning theory. And without going too deep into learning theory, there's a lot we can learn. And so to learn, you have to forget and then relearn. To learn, you have to test and recall. There's some great flashcard tools out there like Brainscape and Anki that help to capitalize on the learning process. So if that's something you're not familiar with, I'd really encourage you to check those out. So repetition, again, doesn't have to be flashcards, doesn't have to be flashcards you create. This could be an online tool, this could be online quizzing. The key here is you're testing yourself with repetition. And test taking and multiple choice selection of tests is really a skill in and of itself that is helpful, because CompTIA exams are going to be typically 90% multiple choice questions, and then sometimes, a lot of times, they'll have what's called PBQs, performance-based questions, which will be diagrams, real-life scenarios, things like that. So the ability to master the ability of test taking with multiple choice is really helpful. Okay, so we covered the initial mock assessment, the deep structured learning, and repetition of new or unfamiliar concepts along the journey of that structured learning path. The structured learning path and repetition phase could last anywhere from 1 month to 9 months. If you take any less time, I'm skeptical you're learning anything. If you take longer than 9 months, I'm skeptical that you're really working intelligently and as hard as you should be to get this done. If it's taking you longer than that, that's not good. So somewhere in that range, depending on your life, your situation, your free time, and your knowledge that you bring to the table. Okay, so that's the 3 steps. Now, step number 4 is something that I also think is really helpful. It's creating an itemized cheat sheet of all domain objectives. So practically, what that looks like, let me just rewind here. So we're using the A+ as an example, and then we have the number of questions here in the test details. We see that it's a maximum of 90. Now, in my experience, question numbers are typically within 15 questions of what they say the maximum might be. I've had some that I remember when I took the ITF Plus, it was literally the maximum number of questions possible, and it drove me mad because that was the shortest exam. I believe it was around 45 or 50 minutes, something like that. And it was fast. You really had to answer each question in under a minute. For something like this, it's a similar thing, right? A maximum of 90 questions. The length of the test is 90 minutes. So there's no time to really reason through in a drawn out way. You either come to this test knowing it with fully prepared with good test taking strategies, or you come to it and you struggle and you don't finish in time. Myself, being a slow test taker and being someone who really struggles, believe it or not, with test taking, I have to use all the tricks in the book. So I'll talk more about that. But passing score is 700 on a scale of 100 to 900. If you run the numbers, the math, you're looking at roughly 20 questions or so, give or take a few, that you could still get wrong out of 90 and pass this A+ exam. So that's something to keep in mind. If you are doing practice tests at the end of your journey and you're scoring below 70%, below 80%, I would recommend revisiting those areas you're struggling before you can get to something like 90% or closer to 100% ideally in your practice tests. And we'll come back to that concept as well. Okay, so creating an itemized cheat sheet of all domain objectives, step 4. This is what I mean. When we come to domain 1.1, we see workstation systems, operating systems, Windows, Linux, the Mac operating system, and the Chrome OS. Right? We also see mobile operating systems, the iPad operating system, iOS, which is also in the Apple ecosystem, and the Android operating system. Now, each one of these has key details, differentiators. It's important that you would be able to explain a little bit, a couple sentences or facts about each one of these operating systems. Not only what they are, but a little bit of their background, where they shine, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and really to be able to compare and contrast them. And you would do this same exact thing throughout this entire document. Now, this is towards the end of the process. So you've done your mock test, you found out where you were, you started through structured learning, and you did that along with repetition of your choosing along the way. So you do all those things, you got to the end of that learning journey, you finished the structured learning path, now you're getting close to the end. You're starting to do what's going to be test prep. And so for me, it's that secondary look, that final working through all of these to make sure that you embark on this research project of going through every single thing. And what I want you to do is an itemized cheat sheet. So there's a couple ways you could do this. You could copy and paste this all into a Word doc. You could edit this in a PDF editor. There's lots of free ones out there. You could print this out and write it down with pen and pencil. There's however you want to do it. But I would tackle each one of these topics. If you're unfamiliar with a particular objective or topic, write down a sentence or two or a few words explaining what that thing is. And so this is where a Word doc might come in handy to really thoroughly investigate everything and make sure that you have, at this point in the process, a full, round, robust understanding of each of these concepts. If you happen to bump into a concept at this point that you're not familiar with, it's a fantastic opportunity to do some research. Go revisit your structured course material, looking things up, Googling, something that's really important skill in IT and cybersecurity. Doing your Googling, doing your reading, whatever it is that works for you. Okay? You're going to do this for every single topic, every topic. Now, this phase ideally should take you less than a month. So, step number 4, you've created your itemized cheat sheet of all domain objectives. You've already worked through the structured course, and that leads you to step 5. So step 5, it's really important, is I want you to go ahead and schedule the exam in advance and give yourself what I like to call a red line window for prep. What is a red line, you say? What does that mean? Go! Okay, a red line is when you are pushing yourself more than you would in a normal balanced lifestyle. And this is not something that you would want to do for an extended period of time, because I'm telling you, this is the opportunity, if you so choose, to be a little imbalanced. What do I mean? Well, if you're like, say, the average American that maybe spends, 4 hours a day in front of a TV, well, then that would look like you cutting back, say, 2 or 3 hours of that time, and then that is getting allocated to study. So getting really critical with not wasting your days, your hours, and minutes throughout day-to-day life for about anywhere from 1 day to, I would say, 2 weeks. Anything beyond a 2-week redlining period, again, after you've scheduled your exam, I think is a little overkill. So you're going to go ahead, step 5, schedule that exam, block it off on the calendar, make sure that about a month in advance, your calendar is clear. Okay, so you schedule the exam about a month away, and a little bit of healthy anxiety and nerves are working at this point. And that's good. You need that, it'll help you learn and study. And you're going to have a little bit more greater clarity of focus in this time period. And you're going to do the last bits of studying, which leads us to the final step, step 6, which is taking advantage of that red line window after you've scheduled the exam. So what does that look like? Mock tests, kind of like we talked about here, lots of questions, lots of quiz questions, lots of mock tests. And the goal here is really a few things. The first thing you want to do is you want to be voraciously searching to make sure you're not coming across any concepts that are new to you at this point. Everything should be somewhat familiar to you, and there shouldn't be anything that you're kind of confused on and not understanding. So, for example, if you're taking a practice quiz and you come across a quiz question, and there's something in that multiple choice question that you don't understand, while maybe you can still get to the correct answer, and let's say you guess and you get the answer right, we want to avoid that kind of thought process. What I want you to think is there a single concept or word or thing in this question as a whole? Is there anything that I don't understand? Is there any of the multiple choice answers that I do not understand? To really go for that exhaustive mastery, that thorough understanding of everything. And in this phase, you should be doing that with whatever quiz questions you're doing or practice tests. Now, quiz questions are fantastic for repetition, flashcards, etc. And I think at this phase, we're in that red line zone, and it's helpful to do 1 to 5, I would say, mock assessments. Back where we started in step 1, we're now circling back. What's the key difference? Well, the key difference between a mock assessment and quiz questions is that I want you to simulate the exam. This exam, as we looked at before, is 90 minutes, right? With up to 90 questions. So that means practically I want you to sit down and whatever tools you have. If you have a system that already has everything mapped out in a exam simulation, that's fantastic. If you don't, that's okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to sit down with some kind of timer or simulation environment and start the clock. And you have 90 minutes, again, for this exam in this scenario. Some are shorter, some are longer. And I want you to go through 90 questions or the simulation environment. Anything that you don't finish, I want you to just put the pencils down, the mouse clicker down at about 88 minutes, and I just want you to click guess because you ran out of time. And this is where I want you to start gauging for, am I going fast enough? For someone like me, that's usually my challenge, is I will go too slow. For other people, they go too fast and they're not slowing down to reason and really think through what is oftentimes what I like to call CompTIA exam questions, where they're trying to stumble you, trip you up, and get you with some kind of tricky answer or question. So finding that balance and being able to simulate yourself to be ready for the time window and appropriately using that time, I think is essential. At the end of this phase, you've done everything. So to do a quick recap, we start off with some kind of mock assessment. You're taking a test that, as best can, accurately simulates the exam and certification and time window and question, and also a balancing of concepts, percentage of questions on the test. You do that, you see how you score in the different areas, and you see what you need to work on. The second stage is that deep structured learning with some kind of plan, strategy, and process alongside repetition of those new or unfamiliar concepts. Fourth, you're creating an itemized cheat sheet of this whole document and making sure that you have worked through each concept. Stage number 5, or step number 5, is scheduling the exam in advance so that you can give yourself what I like to call that red line window for prep, where you really dial in and you make sure that you have time set aside to really dive into and prep for the exam. 1 day to 2 weeks. That's going to look different for everyone. And then lastly, taking those mock tests in that red line phase and reviewing those concepts, the answers you get wrong on your mock tests, and really going through it with a fine-tooth comb. These are really the 6 steps for my proven path to pass any CompTIA exam. For myself, like I said, I have gone through 7 and passed all of them on the first attempt. And the only one I didn't pass on my first attempt was the second test of the A+, way back in the day, the first certification I tried for. Again, I'm not the best test taker, but on the first attempt of the second A+ exam, because the A+ is the only exam that has 2 exams, and I got that wrong. The second attempt, I got it, and that's kind of what led me to the madness of this methodology. So I hope this has been helpful. Like I said, if online course or something like that, an all-in-one digital product is something you're interested in, I'd love to hear from you guys. If you know what you think is a fair, reasonable price for something like that, if I put everything we talked about here in that. And also I want to know, what exam are you prepping for? Is there a particular CompTIA exam? What are you trying to do with that? Are you trying to break into IT? Are you trying to break into cybersecurity? And would love to hear from you guys. Also, lastly, if this video has been helpful and it's something that you found beneficial as far as thinking through how you approach a CompTIA exam, please give this a like and a thumbs up. If you'd like more content surrounding strategic approaches to tackling CompTIA exams, I would really recommend letting me know in the comments, and please share this with anyone that it might also help.